you have to be selective, just like shippers, right? You have to be
Right.
selective with what shippers you work with. You have to be selective with what brokers you develop the relationship with. Like you mentioned earlier, you don't want to build transactional relationships. You want to build a
Right.
long-lasting partnerships. Brokers are very, very crucial because you may be able to find your outbound loads leaving your home terminal, but on your way back, you're not going to run it back empty. So you still need brokers. In my opinion, for any trucking company,
Welcome to the ThinkFreight podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Werdeen. It's my pleasure to have Justin Liu. He's the founder of EzPapel on today's show. Justin, welcome to the ThinkFreight podcast. How you doing today?
good. Thomas, thank you for having me here today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Hey, I heard about EzPapel at, I believe, the Texas Trucking Show like a month ago, and I had been talking with one of the people there. Um, I was really fascinated by the company, but I was even more fascinated by your story and your background. So I knew kind of once I heard a little bit about your background, I had to have you on the show, and we had to talk a little bit about freight and freight technology. So it's honestly my pleasure's all mine, and we'll just kind of dive right into it. So trucking, Justin, isn't the sexiest field in the world. So how did you get into it?
Like a lot of people have a story of how they got into logistics or trucking. Like me
Yeah.
being a second generation trucker, I didn't know what I wanted to do growing up, but I knew one thing I did not want to do, which was trucking. So I started off with my career at Amazon, launching warehouses, turning legacy warehouses into robotic ones.
Okay.
And during that process, I realized that there's a lot of time trucking late to delivery, and we
Hmm.
wouldn't know why they were late or where even they were at. So that's kind of why I was like, oh, I was wrong about the assumption of my dad being archaic. The entire industry was left behind when technology took off. It's such a huge industry, so that's kind of why I changed my mind. That, you know what, let me help my dad out and also learn more about the industry. I went to UC Davis for undergrad and then studied entrepreneurship at MIT. And what's a better timing than now to help a family business and help my dad retire early in a scaled business? So I left Amazon,
Absolutely.
joined my dad, and that's how it all started.
That's really fascinating. Now, you said so your dad has been in trucking. So how long had he been in trucking? Was that like all that he had known, or like how did that come about?
It's he pretty much his entire life. I think he didn't go to college. I think right out of high school, or he was in China at the time. Started being a truck driver. His family,
Okay.
his brothers, my uncles were actually in the trucking business as well at the time. So that's how he got into it, like the family business. And then our whole family moved to the U.S. And when he moved here, you know, he was like, "Oh, I'll be great if I can drive a truck in the U.S. as well." So he got his license. I think he started driving since like 2004, and he
Okay.
drove for about 15 to 16 years or so. And then he started his own business. I think in 2015 was when he started, and I joined him in 2018. Like 3 years after he started his business, he grew from one truck to three truck, and that was his cap. He just could not grow beyond that anymore.
Interesting. So you said he couldn't grow from that three trucks. So you know, looking back, what was maybe the biggest obstacle that he had with kind of scaling and growing the operations? Was he still driving at that time, or was he just doing operations?
He was driving at the time. He was driving
Okay.
one truck and trying to manage. I think the same reason why he was not able to grow is exactly the reason why 90% of the trucking companies in the US got six trucks or less. Because no one really taught drivers, because most of truck drivers, if you look at their background, immigrant, retired veterans, or people who just went from drivers to becoming fleet owners, no one ever taught them how to run a business. They just hear from their friends, oh, there's a load board called DAT. You can work with brokers and they can find loads through there and you can just run, right? So no one really
Yeah.
taught them how to manage a business or how do you calculate your profit margin? He didn't know his profit margin. And I found out 3 months in that his margin was less than 10%, somewhere between the 7 to 8% ish.
Wow.
And then that's a norm for most people. So yeah, so I think he was just too busy driving, too busy doing the busy work. I call them the $5 task, like doing data entry,
Yeah.
emailing, scrolling through a load board, call roadside service, trying to talk to drivers. I mean, talking to drivers is not a $5 task, but hiring drivers and keeping the business going, trying to just to make sure he can pay all the bills and have
Right.
some leftover for him. They're just too bombarded with those type of tasks. They don't really have time to really expand, think about a long-term growth plan, right? They don't know that, how do I find my own shippers? Like they knew that everybody in trucking wants to work direct shippers, but nobody ever taught them how to find direct shippers, and they don't know how. They just think is that, oh, direct shippers, they're not going to work with me. There's actually quite a bit of myth in trucking that in today's podcast, I will actually like to debunk a couple of them with you and discuss those.
Yeah, I would love to. You and I were talking a few minutes before we started, and coming from the freight broker world, you hear a lot of the carriers say, like, they hate brokers, and they hate, why do we need brokers? Why do shippers work with brokers? And it's an easy answer, and it's a complicated answer in a lot of ways. Some shippers are just, they don't want to have the management of 1,000 carriers that they work with. But like you said, it's not always the case that shippers won't work with a one truck operation or a 5 truck operation. There's a lot of shippers that I know from my brokerage days that absolutely would work with owner ops. I mean, there was plenty of times where I was competing against other owner ops, and there was like times my shipper would come back and say, hey, you're $500 too high, and that's because, well, I have to figure in, am I going to get a truck at the low end of this, the high end of this, and I still have to make a small profit. So yeah, like you said, it's just these owner ops, or some owner ops, they just don't have the time, and they've, like you said, they've never been taught how to run a business. So they come into it with the wrong perception of, I'll get all of my freight from the load board, but it should be more kind of about that relationship, and building that way.
100%. It's about the balance mix. Brokers are very, very important, but you have to be selective, just like shippers, right? You have to be
Right.
selective with what shippers you work with. You have to be selective with what brokers you develop the relationship with. Like you mentioned earlier, you don't want to build transactional relationships. You want to build a
Right.
long-lasting partnerships. Brokers are very, very crucial because you may be able to find your outbound loads leaving your home terminal, but on your way back, you're not going to run it back empty. So you still need brokers. In my opinion, for any trucking company, the healthy mix, if you have to put a percentage, I say 70%, 30%, or 60-40, right? 60 to 70% of your freight have to come from your direct shippers. So regardless in what market it is, you can survive. And then the 40%, the
Absolutely.
30 to 40%, you need brokers to help you out. There's no way that you can find all for yourself. And I think that's a kind of like a misunderstanding that no one really addressed in our market, because freight brokers never think about, oh, I mean, carriers, they just move low for me. I don't care if they have shippers or not. But what ended up happening is a lot of those carriers, because they're relying 100% on the spot market, they go out of business. Right? Two
Yeah.
years later, 6 months later, you talk to them. Oh, I just downsized from 10 trucks to three. Why? Because I rely 100% on the low boards, and that's
Hmm.
not good for brokers either, right? Because this
Yep.
reliable carrier were able to cover all those lanes for you. Suddenly, they couldn't cover anymore. You have to keep on looking for new carriers. Similarly, right, for carriers, like as good as low board is, as easy it is, you got to go out of your comfort zone where you learn how to develop your direct shippers,
Yeah.
find your own niche, develop your own like strategies. Here's my one pager. Here's my carrier packet. Put them inside a FedEx envelope. Knock on some doors near your warehouses or near where you park the warehouses near your terminal, and just talk to people. You're gonna get a lot of no's, just like how brokers make 100 phone calls.
Exactly.
Maybe one or two people talk to them. Same thing. You're asset based carrier. You gotta leverage that. You gotta know that your asset based carrier. You don't have to work with Home Depot. You don't have to work with Walmart. You can knock on
Exactly.
you just need one shipper to keep you busy when you're small. So I think that's something I encourage all carriers to try. Find your first shipper, find your second shipper, and work with brokers on being strategic about getting you home on time so they can go out again with your outbound loads.
Yeah, exactly. And to touch on something you had said, when brokers find those good carriers that go out of business, after 2 or 3 years, it just, to touch on what you said, it just comes down to a lot of these carriers get into it when we're in a cycle, in an up cycle, and they don't realize that the freight market is going to flip in, whether that's one day or that's, 4 years from now, it's going to flip. And you're not
Uh-huh.
always going to be running every lane at $4 a mile. So you've got to have that plan, after the fact, because you don't want to downsize from 10 trucks to 3 trucks. That's scaling in the opposite direction. We want to go from 10 trucks to 100 trucks, not back down to one or none, because just like you said, it comes down to just all of that planning and having making sure you're running profitable and making sure you're kind of scaling in those right directions. Kind of a good segue and into this is you know kind of going back to how you guys scaled your dad's operations from 3 trucks. Tell us a little bit more about kind of that process from when you kind of stepped in to kind of like maybe that first year, and kind of how is that growth, and how is that I guess that really transactional phase, or of going about those kind of big scaling operations.
Yeah, love to share that. Like you said, if you don't want to scale the other way, going from 10 to 3, is you need to have a strong foundation. Just like building a
Yeah.
house, doing anything, without a solid foundation, you're not going to survive. And in trucking, a strong foundation is having a system in place, right? Trying to
Yeah.
automate as many of the $5 tasks as possible, and focus on the $500 tasks, right? So for
Hmm.
me, when I approached, first 3 months for me was learning the business. I just did exactly what my dad told me to do. Go to load board, call brokers, try to book loads, try to, it's like a fingers game. Who's faster, right? I
Yeah,
used I used my
absolutely.
mobile app rather than a website, because I can just right click on the dial button. You're
Click to
literally
dial.
playing the
Yep.
war. Yeah, click the dial. Who are you fast? If you're fast, you're gonna get that load. It's the first call, whoever can get it a lot of times. So I did that for about 3 months, and then during this time I was doing the calculation for him. Okay, you're making 7% profit margin, and I was like, do I really have to work with freight brokers for all the loads? Then I looked up. Freight brokers on average have about 15% profit margin. Okay, it doubled my
Yep.
profit margin by matching me to carriers. So technically, my margin could be over 20% if I find my own customers. So by having that mentality, I was like, you know what does it take to find people, and how do I leverage that? So what I did was, made my own one pager to talk about what we do, map out all the warehouses near our office, so that I can knock on doors, introduce myself. Did that about, I don't remember exactly how many, 10 to 20 shippers. Everybody told me no, or gatekeeper. And then I realized that's not the right approach. Rather than
Yeah.
asking them, hey, do you need a carrier? Hey, I'm a trucking company. Do you need a carrier? I change it up, right? I try to figure out what's their pain point. Hey, I know
Hmm.
you have a carrier in place. You may not need one, but I'm 2 blocks away from your warehouse, right? I run 3 trucks, or I run
Exactly.
5 trucks, and you don't need me now, but if you have an urgent load that needs to be moved, I would love to do a test run for you, just to figure out if
Exactly.
we can, help you out or not. So pass on my business, and then that way people are very, more willing to talk to me. Oh, you're our neighbor, 2 blocks away. Let's chat, right?
Yep.
Leveraging the relationship. I'm 2 blocks away. You can always reach me. We're small, but we provide good service. Leveraging that and letting them know that when you need me, let me know, right? You may not need me now, but when you need me, let me know. And when should I follow up with you again? I literally ask them. They go, yeah, sure. But I say, hey, if I don't hear back from you, just so I don't bother you, when should I follow up with you again? They will give me a timeline. Email me, can I stop by, or give you a call, right? I do that consistently. Actually, do the follow up, a couple of times, And shortly after, we landed our first direct shipper. I was going from California to Tennessee, and they pay
Yep.
pretty well, about 20% higher than the market rate. So, right, so that worked really well. Run one load first, and second load, and third load, and then I realized that they haul medical equipment. Okay, and then I start niching down where,
Niching
hey,
into it.
I'm not niching into I'm gonna be the medical equipment hauler in Los Angeles,
Yep.
right? I'm not gonna be known as give me all. By saying no, actually helped us out. By focusing on the niche market, I was able to map out more warehouses that tailor specific to what I can
Hmm.
service, right? Medical device manufacturers, medical, all related warehouse near me, map them out, knock on their doors, building a website, right? Because talking to brokers, a lot of time for LTL, there's Old Dominion, there's UPS,
Yeah.
T-Force. You can go on there and get a real quote and book it. But in the full truck world, really, there wasn't
There's
really that
nothing for
option.
that.
You have to. So I literally pricing my how much our rates into the system where they
Hmm.
can get real time quote. Now it's actually even easier for
Mm.
me. I go there. You may not need me now, but we can provide all the tracking tool visibility. You can get quote. Compare, see if we can do a few run with for you. And we only haul medical equipment, right?
Yep.
And now warehouses, I can hit the mall to target to them. And now you search where do they hang out? You find out they go to conferences, they go to trade shows. Okay, there's a lot of conferences for medical equipment manufacturing in Las Vegas. So, let me go where they hang out. And then
Yep.
when I got there, guess what? There were not a lot of there wasn't a single besides me another trucking company that only haul medical equipment. On my business card, on my flyer, on my one pager, when I talk to those people, oh, I instantly stand out. Like I talk to them, every time you go,
Exactly.
you can get some leads started. So by doing that, we're able to go, having 0% direct shipper, the 10%, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70%. And us growing in number of trucks it was not planned. I didn't plan on growing. It's actually customers asking me, hey, can you cover more? I'm not gonna say no to that. And then they started referring their friends to me because how easy we made it, right? When my truck arrived at a pickup, they don't need to call me. Through automation, through our software, it gives them an automated land the truck has
In
arrived.
automatic. Yeah.
When detention incurred 30 minutes before it happened, send an automated email. Hey, truck has been idling, sitting here for an hour and 30 minutes. We're about to reach detention time. So give them a heads up so they're not surprised, right? They like that. When truck
They
finished
love that.
delivery, they get POD right back to them in the scan version right back into their system. Brokers were not able to provide that. Nobody was able
No.
to provide that beside us at the time. Where even now a lot of companies still cannot do that. So
Hmm.
it's really about the experience, the innovation. Where how do we make it easy for them, and then charge a price that's even if you charge higher, they're still going to work with you. Why? Because medical devices depends on what you haul. A lot of times they cannot afford to have poor service. If you're hauling some
Exactly.
sensitive product, the whole warehouse might be waiting on you to operate. If they're out of product, they're not going to run. A lot of shippers want reliability more than pricing, right? And then that's where I say you kind of have to be selective on who you work with. You don't want to work with everybody. If people just focus on cheapest carrier, you may say no to
Mm-mm.
them. No, I don't want to work for you. Same as brokers. If you just want to take advantage of me, see me as a number, a commodity, maybe I don't want to work with you. That's kind of where you develop that relationship. But
Yeah.
in order to develop that relationship, you have to offer something that other people don't have, which comes what the easiness. Everybody wants to make it easy, right? When you being a
Hmm.
broker, imagine if your carrier was telling you, "Hey, truck has arrived, truck has departed, we're about to reach detention time." Before you ask for POD, right after delivery, it's in your email. Imagine if that happened to you right away. This carrier is gonna move to the top, your preferred carrier. You're gonna want to work
100%.
with them because they make your life easy. Although you may have to pay him $200 extra per load versus a DAT carrier, but for you, it's worth it. It saves your headache. You know nothing's
It's
gonna
always
happen,
worth it. It's always
and
worth
then
it. Like I would always rather pay, someone more money that's gonna get me that I'm not gonna have to spend 25 days chasing a POD down or just knowing, hey, the truck arrived. Because if I know the truck arrived, I can text my customer. I can email them and show them that I'm on top of my game because the carrier is on top of their game and they're A plus, so I can be A plus instead of having to, check the tracking, check this, make a phone call, send an email, wait for the dispatcher to call because they don't give out, driver phone numbers. It's always just, I to touch on a few of the things you said, Justin, you know, to niche down and a lot of what you did in terms of how you guys scaled is exactly what I did as a freight broker, right? I kind of chose what niche that I wanted to like service, and that happened to be like plastics and produce. That's what my freight broker in my when my start TQL, he hauled plastic and produce. So for 6 months, that's what I was really trained to do, and I really honed in on being, I'm gonna haul blueberries, I'm gonna haul blackberries, I'm gonna haul corn and watermelons, and that was what I niched into, and I just became that guy. So it became, I learned everything about watermelons. I learned everything about corn. I learned everything about, strawberries. I learned everything about blackberries, blueberries, any kind of berry that, I would potentially run into, because a lot of, these shippers would ship multiple kinds of berries on one truck. So it would just be having to know, everything about that produce, how it moves, how fragile it is, what are the values, knowing their customers as well as they do, because when you get to a shed, or that truck is potentially going to be late because they got off to a late start because the shed held them because the produce hadn't arrived. So it's just knowing about the processes and just kind of learning everything you can about your customer, or niching into that segment, so that way you can be that expert. You don't want to be the guy that is shipping tires and shipping plastic and shipping this and shipping that, because then you're a jack of all trades but a master of none, and the master doesn't make any money. I mean, I'm sorry, the jack makes no money, the master makes all of the money. So it just, it comes down to, like you said, just building those relationships, going out and saying, hey, in your own area, just say like, I'm here in the Houston area. If I was a freight broker or carrier today, I'd be going, like you said, building, my business cards, building out, my one pagers, and saying, hey, you may not need me today, but I'm 30 minutes down the road. You may have a drop shipment. You may have a hot load that needs to get across the city or somewhere here locally. Give me a call. We can do a trial load. And that's what I did as a broker. I would call and be like, hey, you may not need me today, but this is what I specialize in. I specialize in moving these things. I'm based here in Houston. You're based here in Houston, or you bring freight to Houston. Let's connect, and let's make something happen, because we're in the same neighborhood. So let's connect. And it just comes down to, them eventually, they'll need something. It's going to come down to, just building that time. And sometimes like it said, it just takes that time for them to realize they need you, or realize that they need something, and you're right there. So it just comes down to being like, hey, you may not need some today, but when can I call you back? Because that's exactly the case. Is they'll tell you too. They'll say, hey, call me in a month. That's when we start to get busier. Or 3 months from now, that's when our seasonality picks up, and we might have some more business for you. So it just comes down to just just building those relationships and talking to everyone in your area, niching into something and becoming a master at it. Because if you can show your value and show that you can solve a pain point for a shipper that a broker can't in certain situations, they will happily go to you, or or even a broker will happily go to a carrier that can take away a pain or a stress to them, to make everything
Hun-
easier.
100%. I think that's something brokers, carriers, shippers, everybody needs to realize. We're all in this together. No one needs to be or should be
Absolutely.
eliminated. And it's a partnership. We're leveraging technology to simplify things. And Thomas, I mean, just very resonant with everything you mentioned over there. One
Yeah.
another thing I will ask you from a broker's perspective, right? Have you knocked on doors before, or what
I
are,
have.
if yes or no, and if and what other advice would you give to carriers, like, hey, what are the best way to approach shippers, and that of from, because you've been on the broker side for with
Absolutely.
one of the biggest biggest brokerage firm. What are some best practices you could share?
Yeah, so I would knock on doors, I would send emails. I like to be creative. So do things out of the ordinary, right? If you talk to a shipper and they don't have a need, like I used to have a stack of like 150 thank you cards where at the end of the week I would write down like the top conversations I had. I wasn't going to send one to someone that said thanks but no thanks, but if it was a really good conversation and it felt like this could lead to something, I'd handwrite a thank you note. I had a little script. I put their name in, thank you, put a business card, send it out, because it really showed that, like, hey, I had a really good conversation, thank you so much, I'm thinking about you, no one else is doing it. And a lot of times they just like to get a piece of mail that says thank you, I enjoyed talking to you. And I can't tell you the amount of times where a week later I'd get a phone call or an email with a picture of the card that said, thank you so much, you made my day. And within a month or two, I would start, I mean, sometimes it was a week where I would start getting LTL or full truckload requests. I may not have won them right away, but I would start to get the request. It opened some of the doors to just say, like, hey, I'm not going to just be the person knocking on your door. Hey, I have trucks, I can move your freight. It shows like you're really trying to build that relationship. Another thing is just taking note of the conversation, right? So I guess what do I mean by that is note certain things as you're building rapport with them. If they say, hey, my wife's birthday is Sunday, the next time you talk to them, be like, hey, how was your wife's birthday? Just, it's kind of those little things that, like, and what I look at it as, Justin, I never looked at my I never looked at doing sales or trying to find shippers or my carrier relationships. I never looked at them like it was a transactional relationship. I was always trying to build a friendship with the person on the other side of the table, because I had learned from a very early age that building those relationships with the person across the table is going to open a lot more doors for you than just being a transactional person. The transactional person can generally just be out the door, be fired. But when you really start to build a friendship and be integral in their operations, and it becomes a lot harder for them to fire you as a broker or as a carrier.
Wow. Wow. Those are I learned two more things from you, right? Thank you, like personalized, handwritten thank you cards. Second one is this is actually very important. I can resonate with you as well. Taking notes, remembering
Yeah.
what they said. Hey, I talked to you on July 14th at 6
Yep.
p.m. and you mentioned me, you told me to call you back today to check if you have something. That,
Exactly.
oh, he remembered exactly what I said. Oh wow, for
Hmm.
that I'm not gonna hang up on you. Okay,
Exactly.
call me back again in 2 more weeks. So it make them remember who you are as a person, and
Yep.
remembering the little things like you mentioned. I think it's not just in trucking or freight. Anything in life it's applicable. Where
Absolutely.
the thank you personalized card, the taking notes of what they say, remembering what they said, and in terms of a thank you card, if you have to put a percentage where hey, I send out like 20 thank you card out of every 20 thank you card, I may win two additional businesses. Like, do you have a percentage on what that number might look like?
It was probably somewhere, I want to say maybe like 7 to 12% new business. And it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
just obviously just doing that. It's a lot of
Yeah,
combination things. But I think that
100%.
but I really think that kind of opens those doors. And it really, like, it goes to show, like, you put in the effort, right? If you sat down, like, putting this into like my own perspective, my own life, I never really get thank you cards. Like, if I in life, or even in 2023, I barely get, like, you can see on my wall, like, all these cards are like from my girlfriend, like she gets cards
Uh
all the time. But like
huh.
I don't get thank you cards really. Like, I don't get things like that, whether that's a service that I'm paying for, someone I'm doing business with, anything like that. Like, I haven't really gotten any. And I think that, like, every time I've always been like, wow, like, this person really, like, in 2021, 2022, 2023, went to the effort of getting a stamp, going somewhere and putting this in the mail, and hand like took the time out to handwrite this, like it goes to show, like, in this digital age, that like not everyone is the same, and not everyone is just going to treat you like a number and treat you like, like you don't really matter. And that's kind of how a lot of shippers feel with a lot of like the big box brokers, unless they're a big box shipper, the Walmarts, the Home Depots. They don't really care either, because you know massive corporation to massive corporation, it is what it is. But when you start getting into these smaller shippers, these medium-sized shippers, it really matters, because you're really dealing with the human element. You're dealing with people just like you and me, who really like care about that relationship, care about care about the industry, care about helping. So it goes a long way into building that relationship. And it's just like what we say. We don't You're going after it to kind of like build a friend, right? Like it's like you would at any point in your life. So I like to send my friends birthday cards, thank you cards. So I like to send the shippers that I'm potentially working with the same thing, the same courtesy.
Love it. Love it.
Absolutely. So, kind of just to wrap up a little bit on this part, let's dive into EzPapel. What I'm assuming the listeners have a little bit of an idea as to kind of what you've done as to EzPapel based on our conversation, but they might not. So, what is EzPapel? What did you decide to do um, with this company after scaling your dad's business?
Yeah. So the idea was, I want to help other. I'm not no one special, right? I'm just the
Yeah.
regular dude on the street. You see, I did nothing special. It's a repeatable formula that anyone
Yeah.
can, if they follow what I did, the steps I did, they can succeed as well, right? So Easy Propel, what it actually means is I had a lot of Spanish speaking drivers. They were
Hmm.
really bad with paperwork. Like it's not Spanish speaking. Every driver is bad at it.
Every
I just
driver.
work with
Yeah.
a lot of yeah. I just work with a lot of driver who speak Spanish, and it means paper in Spanish. Papel means paper in Spanish. So I just want to simplify that process. That's where the name came from, and what we do
I like
is
that.
we give trucking company a tool where it's a website where you can customize your own website literally in less than 10 minutes. Your
Oh
own
wow.
modern looking website is built. You can project your own rates onto your own website. The TMS, the backend software, communicate with the front end. Front end is
Very
a
interesting.
platform that serve your customers, right? They can get a quote from your website. They can track their freight. They can see all about you. You're building that digital presence online. On the back end, automate all the $5 tasks, load entry, data entry. The same load, you may have to enter load, like the same information 3 times.
Hmm.
Now you don't even need to enter it once. Our system can automate 100%. If you drag a rate count from TQL in there, if you drag anything in there, it will autofill for you. So you can dispatch your driver,
Awesome.
and then we integrate with your ELD GPS system, and that will trigger automated tracking updates to your customers, to your brokers. And upon completion of a load, driver take a picture of POD. If you set up the automation, it's sent it right away to your customers, to your brokers. They get a copy of it, right? Generating invoice, collect requesting for payment, all the process that used to take about 60 minutes per load now get cut down to about 5 minutes per load maximum. All of your
Wow.
assets, driver compliance, making sure when things expire, when you need the oil change, when your insurance is expire, when your driver license, medical card, when those expire, set up a workflow automation. It can automatically send a reminder to you, hey, you need oil change. Reminder to your driver, hey, your license is about to expire, your medical card is about to expire. Now you got to do your clearinghouse. They just the FMCSA added that I think 2 years ago or last year, right? That's a new thing. There's so many rules keep adding to the system to make sure you
So
stay
many rules.
compliant. And then busy truck owners, you forget those things. Those are not on top of your priority until you get
Yeah.
pulled over. Hey, $300 fine. You did not renew your New Mexico permit, right? This is expired. Your driver forgot to renew their medical card. You cannot drive anywhere. I'll put you out of service. Small things add up, but let the
Yeah. Yeah.
system automate all those $5 tasks. so that you can free up your time to do the $500 task, like developing relationship with shippers, with brokers, with drivers, keeping high retention of your drivers, learning who they are as a person, building this relationship so that you can scale. Negotiate for parts, for tires, right?
Yep.
Talk to your mechanics, a fuel card, so you can increase your profit margin literally from sub 10% to 20% plus. And that's the only way to scale your business. If your margin is at 7%, it's going to be really hard for you. Once you get to 20% profit margin, what happens is you can cut factoring out of your operations as well. Factoring at 3%, people actually don't do the math because I was a math major in college. A lot of people I talk to, nobody actually understand if you put on an annual perspective interest rate, if you're buying a house, I tell you you're paying a 30% interest rate. You're like, get out of here. I'm not paying for that. But what if I tell you it's a 3% annual interest, monthly interest rate? Oh, that sounds very good. Same thing.
Same
Factoring are
thing.
pretty much our monthly contract, monthly loans. If you annualize that, 3% is equivalent to times 12. That's 36% interest rate. That's actually
Yep.
a lot of money that people don't realize. So really, the system, what we build is we're trying to push that to carriers so that they can automate those things, and then they can go develop the business, focus on the profit margin, keep on scaling. How do we get it to grow from 3 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, right? Building that solid foundation with EzPapel, and you can grow from there. We're actually launching a new product called Truckpedia. What Truckpedia does is
Interesting.
we're because what we allow, it's kind of like Expedia but Truckpedia. Right now,
Okay.
we give carriers the tool so they can post their rates on their own website. But if you have five
Okay.
trucks, maybe only a few shippers can find that useful. What we're trying to do is we're aggregating all those carriers together like a centralized platform, a marketplace, right? We're not trying to take out anyone, not taking out brokers, anyone, even for brokers like TQL, they say, I got 100,000 preferred carriers, but you work with them once, you forget about them. Why? Because you
Right.
have no access to their capacity planning and their rates. Now, with this, is we make it possible. We aggregate all the rates, all the planning capacity from carriers, and then we share with the world. Whether you're a shipper, whether you're a broker, or 3PL, anything you do, as long as you need a full truckload quotes, we make that possible to connect them where, hey, go on Truckpedia, you can find a quote. If
That's
you ship
awesome.
a lot, that's API integration, plug that into your system, right? Warehouse, your WMS, your TMS, anything that you have, let's do it. So that's our vision, is really to connect carriers to shippers and brokers through technology. So that's the mission we have at EzPapel. Really, make it like just leverage technology to connect them all.
No, that's really interesting. To kind of nutshell like Easy Papel. I don't know if you know what this is, but do you know like what a second brain is?
I
Do
do
you know
not.
that theory? So this like there's a theory. It's like you have a second brain. It's a book by Tiago Forte, and it's basically like you have this system in place where it's basically like whether that's your notes app or like a Notion, to where it's basically like you plan out or build out all your $5 tasks, like hey, maintenance needs to be done here. You need to do this. These kind of things, automating a lot of those simple tasks. And I feel a lot of that you have built kind of like that second brain for truckers and for brokers to house all of that info and house all of that knowledge and be able to automate all those tool or all of those features to be able to say, hey, like you said, like it takes like 16 minutes after a load's completed to get all the paperwork done, and that's even if the driver sends you the paperwork right away. So it comes down to having all of those tasks that you can forget, those very easily forgettable tasks built into your second brain, which would be Easy Papel, to basically automate all of those tasks and all of those less important things that are not always top of mind for a driver at the end of the day, or for a driver manager at the end of the day, because there is so many things going on, and so many different angles, and it's not just the one driver that you're thinking about. You've got if you've got 50 trucks, you've got a couple managers. They're all thinking about 10 or 12 different guys. So it automates a lot of those very easy to forget tasks, so that you're not forgetting, oh, hey, 28 days ago we finished this low. Now we need to get paid. Like, what's going on? And it's in, kind of going back again to what you said about um, factoring and losing 3% per load. A lot of carriers don't think about this, or even brokers who do factoring. And nothing against factoring, I think it has a good place in the industry,
Definitely.
but in a long-term situation, if you're going about this, you're 10 years in and still factoring, that's a big problem. And you have to think about it like, a lot of guys, and I've heard this as a broker, they're, as offering quick pay, they'd be like, well, I get to keep 97% of it, so that's fine. But what you said, and something that I've always thought is, well, are you running at 97% profit margin? Because if you're not, you're actually losing 3% of your profit, not of the whole load. So if you're running a 10% profit, you're down to 7%. That doesn't sound
That's
like a very
huge.
good deal to
That's
me.
huge.
That's, yeah, 30% of your profit just wiped away because you wanted your money right away, or because you needed the money, right away. Or, it just, a lot of it comes down to just like knowing your numbers and thinking about it from, the overall perspective, and saying, hey, like, if I'm doing one load a day, that's 5 loads a week. That's 25 loads a month at 3% every single load. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And like I said, there's a place for freight for factoring, but when you're really trying to scale your operations and really trying to like hone in on these, especially in these tight markets, 3% is so huge when rates are 25% of what they were a year and a half ago. So
Yeah.
you just really have to have that planning in place, to
Yeah.
make sure that things are running accordingly.
100%. Yeah, I definitely agree. Especially truckers running a 7% margin.
Yeah,
3%, that's almost like 45 to 50% of your profit. You can just literally double, increase. If I tell you can increase your profit margin by 45 to 50%, would you believe it? You can say, no, that's BS. But then if you break it down, oh, okay, actually, the number makes sense. So,
yeah,
so yeah, really enjoy this conversation, Thomas. Thank you for having me on your
absolutely.
show.
No, Justin, the pleasure's all mine. I'm looking forward to having you on the show again here in the future. And is there anything else? Where can people find you guys at online?
They can go on easypapel.ai, easypapel.ai. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn on sharing tips and
Very
resources. I'm
active.
building a trucking company. So find Justin Liu, Easy Papel. You can find me there. Truckpedia.io. If you're a shipper listening to this, you want to find carriers directly to work with, Truckpedia will be the place to go. We launched in Los Angeles only so far, but we're going to be growing pretty fast all over the US with that platform, trying to match them. Brokers, same thing. If you're tired of not having, only working with your carrier once and then forget about them, you want a platform to also see their capacity, let us know. We're just a technology platform trying to make people's life easy.
Awesome, Justin. I really appreciate the time. If you guys are not following Justin on LinkedIn, I highly recommend. He shares a lot of really good content, all around the industry. So please take a look. Link will be in the description. And make sure you take a look at the ThinkFreight 2 times weekly newsletter that drops every Monday and Wednesday, right around 8 a.m. Central Time. Again, we were talking with Justin Liu. He is the founder of EzPapel. And Justin, I'm looking forward to having another conversation with you. Thank you so much for coming on
Look,
today.
thank you, Thomas.